CTE Pro 1 Truth Series, video 15. We're going to take a look at outside spin. The visual that I'm going to use primarily will be a 15 outside. For the most part, I'll be using disguised pivoting, but the principles that I share with you can be used across the board with the four CTE Pro 1 approaches. Yes, CTE is a center cue ball system. It is a professional system. In no way does CTE limit a player to just center cue ball. CTE is foundationally a platform for doing anything that a professional player chooses to do, whether it's a jump shot, a masse shot, a break shot, inside spin, outside spin. CTE gives you that foundation from which to be more accurate for your application of spin. So it's just plumb silly to think that I'm telling everybody that you're going to shoot every ball with center ball. Now when I talk about center ball, I'm talking about the vertical axis of the cue ball. So, basically what occurs all the way from your highest follow tip position to what can occur for your lowest tip position for a draw shot. So that's the center cue ball that I'm referring to. I'm not speaking about just the core of the cue ball. For today's lesson and video 16, I'm using a maple traditional shaft. I cover low deflection, carbon fiber in the book, but it really wouldn't make any difference because the principles for applying outside and inside spin are the same, almost identical for low deflection as what occurs for wooden traditional maple shafts. I'm a recent convert back to wooden shafts. I have a Steve Lomax custom shaft here with a beautiful long taper to it. It's 12.75 inches, and honestly I'm in love with playing the game all over again because I feel like I have found an old friend. For those of you that play the guitar, if you've got your guitar around, you've always got an old friend nearby. So that's the way I feel about a wooden shaft. That wooden shaft was my friend, and I put the daggone thing up in a closet in favor in lieu of going with low deflection. What a mistake that was. If I had it to do over again, knowing what I know now, the last 10 years would have been with my old friend, wooden shaft, the way that the game is meant to be played. Well, enough for that. But there's no doubt in my mind the performance end of what you can get out of a wooden shaft is superior to what occurs with low deflection. Yeah, there's some good qualities about carbon fibers. They're straight, they're slick, there's that 360-degree consistency. There's definitely some good qualities. But what's important to me is performance. Performance and feel. You can't go wrong with a great wooden shaft. That's my opinion. I've rediscovered something that can help me develop ownership of my cue again, of my shaft again, and that's important to me. The bottom line is that I could not reach my full potential with low deflection shafts, but I'm back to the mindset to where I can develop a full potential with a traditional wooden shaft. Okay, I have this cue ball object ball set up as a slight cut to this pocket. We'll just call it a left cut, 15 outside. So my solution to this shot is left cue ball edge to A, center cue ball to right object ball SP15. And let's don't lose sight of the beauty of CTE. 3 aim lines make all shots. I'm absolutely certain when Hal Hool told Efren that you could look at this shot from left cue ball edge to object ball A from the correct position, parallax position, all set from center, that alignment would allow a visual process to unfold that would give you an objective shot line for solving that shot. I'm also sure that Hal shared with Efren and his 3 companions that, along with that English-speaking gentleman, that standing at an offset to the cue ball and the object ball puts into motion a gearing process of inside cue ball to outside object ball. Now, within the context of any visual, the most important line for making spin adjustments is the sight line. So sight lines are hugely important for the application of spin, because sometimes you're not going to move the sight line. Sometimes you're going to adjust the sight line around, so you have to know where that sight line is. So I must know that I'm working with a 15. And if you do your homework and you put the building blocks together, there can be no doubt here that you're working with a 15 and that your sight line is center cue ball to 1 tick past SP15. Now, let's look at our first level for outside spin, level 1. I have all these listed and detailed in the book with some very good practice setups. So I'm going to set this up as a 15 outside in relation to this pocket, it's a left cut, and I'm going to add just a little bit of outside spin to it. And I think of this outside spin as being free because I do not change my visual. In other words, my aim line is still intact, my sight line is still intact. All I'm going to do is just swivel my cue for a little outside spin, just a touch of backhand English. Now, you don't have to use backhand English, you can just do it the regular way. Just fall right on your spin. But if you do it correctly, your bridge V will go in the same spot that it would be for the Nissel. Now, something that's important, some of you may have heard the 3 letters ASS, angle plus speed plus spin. Anytime you're working with a shot, you have an angle to deal with. Now, the angle that we're talking about is not the shot angle, it's the elevation of your cue. And you have to think about angle plus speed. You have to think about your speed when you're applying spin. And then obviously you have to think about the amount of spin and your tip positioning. So, sometimes you're applying a combination of top spin and side spin and so forth. So, ASS is important, but for me, and I teach this in the book, I add I front load an additional A to the ASS so that I have ASS. So the first A is that this is a 15 outside. The second A is the angle of my cue. That's extremely important. And when you're working with traditional wood and low deflection shafts, particularly the carbon fiber, it's a lot more fuzzy as to what you should do with the angle of your cue when you're working with carbon fiber. That's my experience. When I'm working with a traditional wood, it's a lot clearer to me whether my cue needs a specific elevation or not. So, for this particular shot, it's a 15 outside. Now, I'm just going to use disguised pivoting for the most of these shots. So, I know that this is 15 outside. So I'm going to see the visual, step the cue ball, the missile will be revealed. I already know that I'm going to have my cue at a pretty level presentation to the shot. So that's something that I've learned. This is a principle for applying this spin. Okay, 15 outside. So I've stepped the cue ball, I go in for parallax vision, I go right into the shot line that makes the ball, and then I'm just going to swivel my cue about a quarter of a tip to the outside for a little bit of outside spin. That's a free shot. I didn't have to adjust my bridge feed, and I didn't have to change my visual. All I did was just swivel the cue. You know, when you're using spin, the path of least resistance is your best approach. So, you know, if I can get by with center cue ball, I'll use center cue ball. If the shot calls for just a smidgen of outside spin, just a little touch of outside spin, then that's how I apply. Now, let's take a look at level 2. I'm going to set this shot up as a 15 outside. It's going to be along the rail here as a right cut. So, the first thing that I know is this is a 15 outside. So, I solve the shot with right cue ball edge to object ball C. And the second A is the angle of my cue. It's very important that I understand my cue is going to be angled a little bit here. It's going to have an elevation to it. It's not going to be level. If I try to approach this shot with the principle that I'm presenting to you with a level cue, we get something else. So, what I'm going to do, and this is where the sight line, becomes hugely important. Because the solution to this shot is right edge to C and center cue ball to SP15. I'm going to adjust the sight line by 1/16 of an inch fuller on the object ball. Fuller toward the core of the ball. 1/16 of an inch. That is a perfect adjustment for that shot. Some of you are thinking, well, how can you see 1/16 of an inch? Well, it'd be difficult to measure it out with your eyes, but when you adjust that little bit, that very slight amount that you're quantifying as being 1/16 of an inch, you'll see that over and over and over and over you can make that shot with that adjustment. So, some of you might be thinking where that came from. I didn't just pull that down out of thin air. That came out of Pool and Billiard magazine, 1995, July issue. And where did that 1/16 of an inch adjustment come from? It came from none other than Efren Reyes. It came from Efren Reyes. So now when Efren says it, it has a little bit of a different ring to it than when Stan says it. 1/16 of an inch. I read that article a few times before it really got, before it really sunk into me. It's not so easy to adjust that 1/16 of an inch when you're just doing conventional aiming. But when you're at parallax using CTE, and I'm looking at this sight line right here, I'm just going to adjust it to be 1/16 of an inch this way. My cue's going to be angled, and there's going to be a little bit of a low outside spin. If you had to name the favorite shot of a professional pool player, they would probably say low outside spin, because it's almost a free shot. that this is an example of a low outside spin shot that professional players eat up over and over and over. So, parallax viewing, I'm going to go in. My focus is going to be on the sight line, and I'm going to dig into the ball with just a little bit of outside spin, not much. Your quarter tip, maybe up to a half tip, and there we go. So there's my aim line, sight line from parallax. Now I can do that adjustment right here. I can just adjust by 1/16 of an inch right here. And then when I go in, I'm just focusing on the sight line. I'm adjusting 1/16 of an inch. And that is a level 2 adjustment that you can apply over and over and over for your application of outside spin, whether you have a traditional shaft or a low deflection shaft. Now our level 3 application for outside spin, and I'm just going to set up another 15. Our level 3 application for outside spin is we're going to add a little more spin to it. That little bit of digging into the ball and getting a little spin on it's not quite enough. So we need some more rotation, some more horizontal rotation on the cue balls. This mixed in with your backspin. So we're going to turn the ball more, and this is almost always for positional purposes. So what am I going to do? First of all, I'm going to say the word contact point. There it is. Stan said the word contact point. I'm going to preface that though with perceived contact point. I'm just going to walk around here and I'm going to look at what I perceive as being the contact point. Now, I'm not going back into conventional aiming at all. My head is still going to be to the right at parallax. That's not going to change. My aim line for solving the shot is not going to change. I've got my sight line, but what I'm going to do with the sight line from parallax is I'm going to move the sight line to my perceived contact point. So here we go. So there's my right edge to C for solving the shot. So I'm going to move to the left, but my head's still parallaxed. Now, instead of having my parallax vision in such a way that I can see the sight line here, I'm moving to the left and I'm picking up the sight line, which is about right here. So now I'm still at parallax and I'm seeing the sight line here. So in the past, people have said, well, how do you use CTE when you're putting spin on the ball? I'm putting spin on the ball by way of using my foundational lines, but with an adjustment. Anytime you're working with an adjustment off of known lines, that's pretty darn strong. So, once again, I have my angle, 15 outside. My cue is going to be angled here. Now, so I'm going to make my adjustment, sight line to the contact point. I'm going to go in with a little more spin this time. So I'm going to stay at parallax. So I'm not conventional at all here. So I'm going to have a little more spin on the ball. And that's your level 3 application for using outside spin within the context of CTE Pro 1. Guess where that came from? Some of you have already gotten it. F. and Reyes. where did that appear? It appeared in the July 1995 Pool and Billiard magazine, where Sherry Souch was interviewing Nestle O'Hare, and she got some lessons from Nestle O'Hare, but Sherry also talked with Ephraim. This came directly from Ephraim Reyes. This came directly from Ephraim. Now it carries a little bit more weight, but the weight got a whole lot heavier for me when I realized that I could adjust my sight lines for applying exactly what Ephraim had said. Keep in mind that what Ephraim shared with Nestle in that Pool and Billiard magazine was that when you're working with full type shots, just use the center in the center. Well, for disguised pivoting right here, I do have a relation line of center to center. What else did he tell Sherry? Not Sherry, but Nestle, that when you're shooting cut shots, aim with either the right edge or the left edge, and for the object ball, divide it into quarters. Does all that sound familiar? If you're going to aim the edge of the cue ball to this quarter line, doesn't matter who you are, you're going to be at an offset. And when you're at the correct offset, you've got a sight line to work with. So, when I started putting these principles together for using outside and inside spin, I started learning how to really use my shaft, whether it was an LD shaft or a carbon fiber or a wooden shaft. So, my problem with using a wooden shaft years ago was that I really didn't have a proper education on how to use it. So I primarily went to low deflection, thinking that would somehow help me. Well, maybe it helped in some ways, maybe it didn't. But when I started looking at principles for using spin and how to apply those principles consistently over and over and over as needed, then I started learning how to really use the shaft better than I ever had. And then when I switched over back to wood, I realized that my problem with a wooden shaft beyond 10 years ago was not because it was a wooden shaft with a lot of deflection, it was because I didn't understand the proper way to use it. Now, let's take a look at this shot. I don't have this in as a principle, but the use of this is very important. I had my cue elevated for that level 3 shot. My cue was elevated. Now, if I go down with a level cue, okay, let's take a look at the contact point. The contact point was about right here, so I moved my sight line to the contact point, and my cue was elevated. Now, so the contact point, obviously, in relation to the sight line, is again fuller on the object ball. Now, if I level my cue out with this traditional wood shaft, what will happen is this. So the same shot, if I level my cue out with this traditional shaft, then the deflection comes into play and I missed a shot. So you see, I have to understand that double A at the front. I have to understand that second, that first A, I have to understand cue elevation. So I automatically have to know what elevation I want. So if I want to use a level cue and outside spin, now I'm going to have to move the sight line to be thinner on the object ball. So I might move the sight line out here to the edge of the ball. So let's just see what happens if I move it out here to the edge of the ball. So it's almost as if I'm looking at a SP and SP30. So it's hugely important to understand Q elevation. Q elevation is so much easier to apply when you have a wooden shaft than it is a LD shaft. It gets fuzzy with an LD shaft or a carbon fiber shaft. And honestly, I'm not trying to sell you on either shaft, because I'm not getting paid. I'm not getting paid to play with this. In fact, I just spent a lot of money with Steve Lomax on some Q work and such. So I'm not getting paid to play with this. I'm just sharing with you my opinion, my experience. Wood's going to be making a comeback, folks. I think I shared this with Steve. I really think that there just needs to be a lot of great education out there concerning the use of wooden shafts. And I think that's more of the issue than anything. There just needs to be an education on the beauty of these boys. I mean, they're wonderful. Okay, level 4. Now this gets to the point where you really want to maximize your outside spin. You're really wanting to turn that cue ball. So the spin application here gets a little iffier, because if I'm going to really turn that ball, this is a 15 here, 15 outside. I'm just trying to keep consistent with my visual. I might elevate just a little bit more, and I'm going to add a little bit more spin, and I'm even going to go fuller on the object ball. So this shot involves a lot more feel. So level 4, I'm going to pay a lot of attention to cue elevation. I'm going to move my sight line to beyond the contact point to be even fuller on the object ball. So you see, I'm still using the foundational lines that the 15 outside visual gave me. So I'm right here, I'm moving the sight line almost all the way to the core of the ball. I may even miss this ball, because this is really pretty iffy. Even on this shot, as close as it is. So here we go. So you see, I'm elevated here, and I have more spin added. Perhaps you couldn't tell it by the way the cue ball left the rail, but you can take these 4 principles for applying outside spin in conjunction with using a sight line for a given visual, whether it's a 15, 30, 45, or 60, and really improve your game, because of the consistency that you're going to get for doing the same thing over and over. Okay, very quickly, I'm trying to think if there's any loose ends that I want to tie up here with outside spin. I don't think so. That concludes video 15, and see you in a bit for 2 series video 16. Thank you very much.